Um, it sounds very, very, very harsh and very bad if it's true, but Honorable Victoria and our dear listeners, I would like to assure you that going forwards, this will not be the case. We will not look on, or we will not be part of the causes of young businesses in our country, because it's just logical that if we are going to sustain the activity of revenue collection and raise enough taxes to build our economy, we need as many health entities, businesses as possible. And the bigger the business entities, the better for revenue collection. So we are definitely stakeholders in the interest of growing small businesses into large and medium enterprises. And therefore, we would be defeating the sole purpose for our existence if we participated in making sure that small businesses close. Therefore, we will have a deliberate effort at Uganda Revenue Authority to handhold those businesses and teach them how they can keep their records, how they can run their businesses. And as you all know, we only tax income. We do not tax capital of the businesses. We do not tax losses. So we will, even where we are not collecting tax, make a deliberate effort to educate the small taxpayers so that they can grow to levels where they can make income which we can tax later. We will improve the quality of our services at Uganda Revenue Authority so that our taxpayers can have an experience that is enjoyable, that is responsive, that is sensitive to their challenges. Therefore, one of the areas that we are going to do is to revamp and modernize our call center so that all our taxpayers will have 24-hour access to us through telephone, through emails, through the various social media platforms where they can share with us information either regarding to proposals on what we can do to improve our tax collection activity, or whistleblow to us some of the revenue losses. And we want to mention that there is a benefit when you bring information that is accurate and can help us recover tax. Under the law, we have a reward scheme that entitles you to a percentage of the revenue recovered, and we'll make sure that that is functional. But also, most importantly, to be able to conduct the businesses of filing, payment of taxes smooth and seamless. And at this point, I would like to mention our active toll-free lines, which our taxpayers can use to reach us. For now, it will be 16 hours from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day, Monday to Sunday. But as need arises, we can make this service 24-hour available, at least to take all telephone calls. And our lines are 0800 117 000. I repeat, 0800 117 000. The other line is 0800 217 000. I repeat, 0800 217 000. These lines will be active and open to receive any information that relates to tax issues, whether it is information, whether it is inquiry, and we will be very keen to answer. But we also have all the other social media platforms, our website, our social media platforms are all open for you to reach us anytime and give us ideas on what we can do to make our services better. Furthermore, we are going to optimize the use of technology. We'll ensure that all functional capabilities of existing technologies are utilized, and we will definitely improve our services. Previously, we've had complaints on the times when our sites are down, when our taxpayers can't reach us. We are looking at a plan to overhaul our IT systems and make sure that they are faster, they are more efficient, they are more responsive, and have minimum downtime. We are addressing the issues of staff integrity and skills. I'm sure we all heard the speech of His Excellency the President on the Budget Day. We have embarked on an exercise where we will be responsive to any information that is raised about the integrity of our staff, and we have started making the necessary adjustments. So as an organization, we are going to be 100% accountable to the citizens of this country, and we'll make sure that everything we do is above board and there is no conflict of interest or any decision that we take for personal benefit. The decisions we take going forwards at Uganda Revenue Authority will be those to enhance revenue collection for the country and for improving our economy. In the same stride, we will embark on staff, skilling of our staff to make sure that they have skills that match the skills of our taxpayers, so that we come up with accurate assessment of tax and we are able to defend the tax positions that we take, so that no revenue will be lost because of lack of the requisite skills. We will embark on research. We have the whole department of planning and research headed by an assistant commissioner, a whole division. And going forward, we are going to deepen our efforts in research so that by the time we speak to you, we have well-researched positions which will help us improve our tax collection efforts. We will continue to deepen our efforts in facilitation of trade. I've already explained how we will support the small and medium enterprises, but even for all the taxpayers globally, we will deepen our function of facilitating trade, of deepening our partnerships with the global entities that can help us improve business with our country. We will enhance strategic partnerships with all government MDAs, the civil society, and I like the contributions that came through yesterday from civil society, so that together we can take tax collection and the contribution to the economy to the next level. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to assure you that at Uganda Revenue Authority, we have done our homework. We have taken the lessons that we needed to pick from the COVID pandemic. We are making the necessary adjustments to make sure that we will enhance our internal capacity as a country to collect enough revenue that can support the development of our economy and can transform the lives of our citizens. May I now take the opportunity to make some small clarification on some of the issues that were raised yesterday, so that I sit down and I allow my colleagues, the team of commissioners that is seated on the platform, to add on any information that I will not have mentioned. There was a comment, and I think again it was from Honorable Victoria, that talked about taxing of agricultural equipment. And we first of all want to appreciate very much your comments, Honorable Victoria Sechitoreko. They were spot on, but on the issue of agricultural equipment, I've come with a list, and maybe I will not read all of it because it has so many items, of equipment that is tax-free. So most of the agricultural equipment under the VAT Act of 2019 and also under the East African Common External Tariff of 2017, most of the agricultural equipment, just to mention a few, agriculture and agriculture equipment, disc harrows, cultivators, plows, weeders, seeders, and all that, planters, on one side are tax-free. At the same time, threshers, bale wrappers, milking machinery, maize mills, wheat flour mills, homogenizers, dairy machinery, grain cleaners and sorters, feed grinders and hatcheries, implements for artificial insemination, hullers, are all exempt of VAT, and others including grain dryers, manure spreaders, fertilizer distributors, transplanters, juice pressers and crushers, seed and grain shellers, silage choppers, color sorters for coffee, coffee roasters, rice mills, agricultural sprayers. All of these are under the category of exempt items. These equipment are exempt of VAT according to the VAT Act of 2019, and they're also exempt of import duty under the East African Common External Tariff of 2017. Now, having said that, there could be issues, there could be instances where some of these items have been taxed, but this would only be, according to the research department, where either the customs, the agents misclassified these items, or they did not provide the customs procedure code. So if there are any exceptions where any of these items and others that I have not read have been taxed, it would be an error because of misclassification by the agent. Therefore, going forward, this is one of the areas that will be addressed by clear tax education, clear publication of the exempt items, so that our agents will know what is taxed and what is not. I thought it would be important to clarify that it's not only dairy products that are exempt, but many other value addition equipment, especially for the agricultural products. The other item raised was on packaging materials, and it's true that before, most of the packaging materials were not tax exempt, but except for medical packages. But effective this financial year 2017, which starts effective this financial year 2020-21, starting from 1st July, the list of exempt items has been expanded for the packaging materials, and communication has been made to the Uganda Manufacturers Association and to the rest of the taxpayers. We run public notices so that you would be able to see some of the packaging materials that have been exempt. But the beauty with these issues coming out during a conference like this is that there is room for discussion and engagement with our tax planners and policymakers to consider others that may not be in the list. But the list is much longer, and I think my colleagues, especially from customs, may mention the details of that list. I think those are some of the issues, but yes, then there was a mention on our tax register, which is very true. It was a very valid submission. Whereas the Ugandan population is estimated to be rising towards 45 million. If we take off the non-active in the matters of the economy, say for those ages 18 and below, we still have about 18 million who are citizens active in the matters of the economy and who are potential taxpayers. So part of the things that we will do in the domestic revenue mobilization strategy will be to enlarge our tax register, and we will take time to know who the active citizens are and what they do. And this should not, suggest that everyone we take interest in knowing what they do will be subjected to tax. But we think with better information on who the active citizens are and what activities they are doing, it will give us an opportunity, one, to help those who are dealing in informal businesses to formalize and to build them from one stage to another. And at the right time, when there is capacity to pay, that is when they will be asked to make a contribution. But without a doubt, we are looking at enlarging our tax register. So in summary, dear listeners and all participants in this post-budget conference, at Uganda Revenue Authority, we are going to look deeply into the issues of governance and management of the tax administration activities. We are going to step up our level of accountability and transparency in how we handle these issues. We are going to improve the human resource capacity of our staff. We are going to deepen our data analysis and data management. We are going to rely more on IT systems to give our taxpayers a better experience. We are going to expand our tax register. We are going to deepen our tax education and services and communication. We are going to be timely in the way we respond to you on tax queries and matters, and even in the way we handle our tax assessments and audits. We are going to make life easy for all those willing to pay taxes by making our systems and processes seamless. We are going to, where necessary, handle investigations and enforcement efforts in bringing compliance, and we will quickly resolve any disputes that arise during the process of taxation. And of course, we have already submitted our budgets to the Ministry of Finance for tax refunds. So on our part, we will expedite the process of tax refunds, and I'm sure as it came out, there is already a sign that the tax refunds are happening, and we'll do that until we have dealt with the backlog, so that there will be liquidity among our taxpayers and they will not be constrained as a result of withheld tax refunds. So with these many few words, I want to once again thank our participants I want to thank our moderators. I want to thank all of you who have taken time to listen to us this morning. We are looking to further interaction with you, even past this conference at URA. We will have an open door policy when you can walk in and give us your ideas. I've given you our telephone numbers. They will be on and they will be properly manned. Our emails, our telephones are all open to you. Please continue to engage us so that together we can raise enough money that will build our economy, that will make our country economically independent, and will not have to get half of our budget, as the situation is, or more, from loans and donor funds, and that we will be able to change the lives of our people, most importantly, by mobilizing enough resources that will cause the long desired social transformation that we would want for our country. Thank you so much. May God bless you.
Thank you very much, Siji, for those very kind words. And I want to be very particular that there are a few highlights. Data is very important, of course, in making decisions, and that URA is going to take that path, which they have also been doing, but a bit of cleanup and bettering it is a very good promise that we can bank on as Ugandans. Tax education, very important. We definitely, maybe some people think paying taxes is just, taking away from the little profits that they do make, but we need to understand the importance of paying the taxes if we're going to demand for the services. Accountability, very key. Accountability and transparency is very, very key. But coming next, I would like to recognize the presence of Honorable Dr. Gabriel Aljedra from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, in charge of general duties. And I would also like to request that Dr. Aljedra, you come and make your submissions right away. Let's welcome Dr. Aljedra immediately.
Good morning, participants. I can see my honorable colleague, the chairperson of the budget is here, and other members of parliament if they are present, Commissioner General, the staff from the ministry, heads of government departments and agencies, the media, fellow Ugandans, ladies and gentlemen. I'm supposed to make this speech at 10 o'clock, but I got the information late, and that's why I'm a bit late. But nonetheless, I want to welcome you to the second day of the post-budget speech e-conference for the financial year 2020-2021, which is focusing on financing the national budget and understanding the tax policies for the financial year 2020-2021. And I think the Commissioner General has alluded to some of the tax measures that we have proposed in the next financial year. As you all know, tax is an important role in the economic development of our economy. We use taxes to finance our budget in order to provide the necessary services to our citizens. But also the tax measures and the tax regimes can also be used to spur economic development and economic growth. Therefore, this e-conference, which has been organized, is one to dialogue in terms of how to show up Uganda's tax effort in order to provide much needed public services. For those of you who probably don't know, the tax to GDP for Uganda is the lowest in the EAC. I think the last time I think it was calculated, I think it was 14.5, which is very low. Our peers like Kenya and so on, they're about 18, approaching 20%. So there's need for us as a country to double our efforts to improve revenue collection and also the administration of tax. Two, The other objective of this conference is to diagnose in terms of how to make the tax regime more supportive of the entrepreneurship, innovation, private sector recovery, and economic growth. And I think the Commissioner General alluded to that. As probably most know, most of our businesses are informal. I think there's a need for us as a country to formalize most of these businesses. And the developed countries, it's very easy to be able to support businesses at this particular time. Why? Because they are registered. And therefore it is very easy for us to extend support to businesses. But if you're not registered, then it becomes very difficult for government to help you. So I urge Ugandans really to try to formalize their businesses. The deliberations of day 2 of this conference will therefore enable the public, one, to fully understand the tax measures in the budget in order to take advantage of them, and also two, to provide constructive feedback. And I've been given a list of comments, I think, which came, questions and comments that came out from yesterday's conference. Very valid ones, and I'm sure those to whom the questions have been raised, that is Ministry of Finance, URA, Bank of Uganda, and others will be able to answer some of these questions that have been put forward. One of them here is, why is Uganda central bank rate higher than other countries across the world? I hope Bank of Uganda is ably represented here. If they are not, then at the appropriate time, they need to come and answer this question. I think one of the problems we have is that there's a lot of domestic borrowing, and the people who borrow this money largely are the commercial banks. Treasury bills and bonds, whether it's a 90-day or 180 or 365, most of the people off-takers of the treasury bills are the commercial banks and NSSF. So therefore, if the treasury bills are at 10-11%, the commercial banks definitely will have to add a margin for onward lending to businesses and to individuals who want to do business. But also, one of the cardinal principles, the main objectives of central bank is to contain inflation. And one of the instruments that is used basically to contain inflation is the interest rate. And so you have to have a balance between low interest rates and inflation on the other side. And so I hope Bank of Uganda will be able to answer some of those questions. One of them was, do you believe in per capita income? I'm just picking some of the questions at random. Do you believe in per capita income? Yes, it's one of the ways of measuring economic development of any country. How people are well off is largely measured by the per capita income. If you look at per capita income of countries like United States, over 30,000, I don't know the latest figure, it gives an indication of the wealth of the economy and the wealth of the people. And that is an average. And therefore, whatever we do as Ministry of Finance, we have to put in policies and programs so that we can be able to increase our per capita income. The debate has always been, is it per capita income that is relevant, or is it the purchasing parity power? I think Uganda has a much higher purchasing parity power than the per capita income. In other words, your 1,000 shillings, which is equivalent to maybe about 25 cents US, United States, buys you more in Uganda here than when you're out there. The other day, I went to the market, and there was a lady who was able to buy fingers of matoke for 1,000. But you try with the 25 cents, buy something like that, an equivalent in other developed countries will not be able to do so. So I think there's always that debate between per capita income and the purchasing power parity. So while we may have a higher purchasing power parity, but we have low per capita income. And because of our population, I think the Commissioner General was saying we're going to be about 45 million. When you have very high rate of population growth, then you cannot be able to increase your per capita income at a rate that you love to, because certainly the economic growth of about 6-7% will be negated by the population of growth, which is about 3.2%. So if you have to look at it, the net economic growth probably is about 3.5%. And therefore, you cannot be able to achieve your objectives in terms of per capita at a rate that you will love to. One of the interesting questions that was which was asked here, government is doing well in supporting innovation. Can there be a policy to stop MDAs from importing IT systems if the Ugandan people are to benefit more? I think that's very important. We place emphasis on innovation, and where possible, I think we need to challenge our young people to be able to come up with IT solutions that can be able to address one of the challenges that we have. And the other issue was the issue of borrowing. I remember seeing it somewhere that at this rate, shall we be able to pay our debt? You see, when you do not collect enough taxes for the government to be able to provide services, it must borrow. We have no option but to borrow, either domestically or from international financial institutions. The worst part is the domestic one, because the interest rates are very high. When treasury bills are auctioned, when we ask Bank of Uganda for money, the interest rates are, at least before they lower down, interest rates are about 10 to 12%. And that is very high compared to what you'll have borrowed from financial institutions outside the country at commercial rates of about between 0.5 to about 2%. So you can see the cost in terms of the interest payments is much higher on the local debt compared to the external debt. And we should, as much as possible, really try to limit it. And the only way we can try to limit borrowing domestically is if URA is able to collect a lot more revenue to be able to support government programs. Therefore, I would like to assure the country that this dialogue is going to be extended to all other regions, and also possible maybe in the local languages, depending on the location. We'd like to assure the country that we remain committed to these public engagements and ensure that feedback that you provide in these conferences will help us to improve and design or fine-tune our policies. Before I conclude, I must say that as a country, I think we have done pretty very well in terms of containing the COVID. We're happy that as a country we have not been able to lose an individual or anybody due to COVID. But that should not give us a room for relaxing the measures or the standard operating procedures that have been put forward by Ministry of Health. We should, as much as possible, try to adhere to them until such a time that we see the graph going down, and then maybe we can fully open the economy. I know it has been a very difficult time for everybody, especially those who had to close their businesses, particularly because of the directives. And I think we as a country will now need to open our eyes. I think what COVID has done, one of the greater things, the positive things that COVID has done is it has awoken us that we need to have import substitution. That things that we can make locally here, in the country where the raw materials are plenty and abundant, we should take advantage of them. And I think government is committed to that. There have been policy pronouncements to that effect so that we can be able to increase substitution in this country. Certainly, most of the things can be made here. There are certain things which cannot because of one reason or the other. For example, petroleum imports. We'll probably import them until such a time we're able to have our own refinery. Those you cannot avoid them. But things like pharmaceuticals, for sure, we should be able to make those locally here instead of importing them. The other day, I had asked the tax policy to give me, I think it was URA, that was last year. I asked URA to give us a list of the import bill. What is it that we import most in this country? And it was amazing to see most of those things we can actually make them in this country. We can make them in this country. And therefore, I think what COVID has done is really to open our eyes that we need to focus more on import substitution so as to reduce the reliance on imported items. So in conclusion, I want to thank again the Budget Transparency Initiative partners, the organizers of this particular event here, the media fraternity, towards supporting government efforts in deepening citizens' understanding of the national budget, but also increase the accountability and enhance service delivery. One thing I need to say before I wind down is the fact that when you talk to people, people are agitated by the fact that they don't have a problem to pay taxes. They don't have. It's a citizen's role. That's one of your noble responsibilities as a citizen. The question is, how do we use that money, the money that has been collected? And I've just received a delegation of private sector players who are concerned about the corruption in the country. And certainly most of that can be reduced very, very easily. I always say that most people hide behind these procurement laws, the procurement PPDA law, to be able to do that. But in other countries, the same law is being effectively applied in terms of how to fight corruption. I always give this classic example. If you remember the Karuma saga, they were still evaluating, and somebody was saying, no, you see, I'm being victimized during the evaluation process. For sure, how did you know that I was being victimized? And then they ran to the courts to say, no, I'm being unfairly treated in the evaluation process. Even way before the results are brought up. It means there was a leakage. It means there was somebody in that team who was leaking the information to the bidders. Can it be stopped? Yeah, sure. That can be stopped. You ask me how? In Botswana, what we used to do was we lock you in a room like this one here. You evaluate from here. You leave all your phones outside. You go to a hotel room, stay there for 1 week. You take off your phones. If you want to call your family, you can walk out, call your family. We shall be listening at the same time. We'll be listening whether you're really calling your family or you're calling one of the bidders. And when you're finished the evaluation, assessment is done, and the results are announced. And corruption reduced tremendously. So some of these things can be done, but people sometimes do not want to do it for their own reasons. So in conclusion, I want to thank all of you for being here. I wish you very successful deliberations, and be assured that we will take your comments, your questions for purposes of refining future policy measures, but also, if necessary, in this coming financial year. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I have to go out because of other commitments. I would love to stay here, but my technical people are here. I'm sure they should be able to pick up all the necessary questions, comments, we'll be able to discuss that during our top management for purposes of future policy refinements. Thank you so much. I say this for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Honorable Al-Jadra, for your comments, and definitely there are lots of questions coming in from Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. We'll be getting to that at a later stage. To be able to manage time, we'll go to our next speaker, and I will be inviting the Commissioner of Domestic Taxes at the Uganda Revenue Authority, none other than Mr. Patrick Muchibi, who will be focusing on the financial year 2020-2021 domestic amendments, the incentives, the opportunities for Uganda. Many people are asking, what is in it for me? But also, as you come through, Mr. Muchibi, there are lots of questions on the fact that many of these amendments probably could have come through, or the budget was set pre-COVID. And the question is, are some of these amendments still tenable post-COVID or during the COVID times? But also looking at the temporary relief measures, for example, deferring payee, looking at a delay of payment of corporate tax, and so many others that have been set. Are these going to be practical in this time? I welcome you.
Honourable Minister, Honourable Member of Parliament, and Chairperson of the Budget Committee, Commissioner General URA, Director from the Ministry, colleagues, commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, those viewing us and those listening to us, I wish you a good morning. And I am happy to be in this position to share with you the benefits and the opportunities that arise out of the recently read budget. Yesterday, as I sat in for the first day, there's a panelist who raised the issue of unhealthy interactions with the Uganda Revenue Authority. He went on to say that most of the interactions that the taxpayers have with the authority leave them bruised. He said, at least financially. And he said one of the areas that can be used to address this issue is the tax rate. He said, this tax rate is so high. And I kept pondering over this. And I was asking myself, and I've done so over the years, how much of this unhealthy relationship is the responsibility of the taxpayer, and how much of it is the responsibility of the tax collector or administrator? As the tax administrator, we will not shy away from that responsibility. We contribute to this in a great way, in a big way. But also, as a taxpayer, there's some areas that can be tackled and can be helpful to mitigate this negative relationship, so to say. And I thought one of the areas is awareness, to know what to do. How many times as taxpayers do we find ourselves in situations How many times, thank you, Mildred. How many times do we find ourselves in situations where we actually program to listen to the taxman when he comes, when he prompts, he knocks, he visits. And usually our visits come too late. When you've already planned your business, when you've gone down that road, and you do not have URA anywhere within your tax plan, within your business plan. So my understanding My understanding is that the more we relate with the tax authority from the onset, when we're starting our business, the business planning, the more we do it, the less likely that we are going to have these negative interactions. Today, where I'm going to do my best to bring to you certain provisions within the law, as has already been passed, that can help you seize that opportunity to relate with us well. And I will restrict myself to those provisions that the August House has already deliberated and has already passed. That means that the COVID provisions that are still looming and they are being debated may not be appropriately discussed here, although you are at liberty to raise the issues. Please note, as we start this discussion, and it will be brief so that we allow questions, that for the next year alone, the Uganda Revenue Authority will be requested to contribute up to 19.8 trillion. Now, of this 19.8 trillion Ugandan shillings, domestic taxes, where I belong, would have to contribute 12.7 trillion, almost 13 trillion. Of that 13 trillion, the majority of that will come from domestic or from direct taxes. Direct taxes, I mean pay-as-you-earn, corporation tax, withholding, rental, those direct taxes, treasury bills, and the rest of it. That's 51% of it, 6 trillion, 6.5. Then the other one will come from the indirect, that is VAT and excise, 4.6 trillion. Of course, the NTR, which will contribute the 12%, is expected to bring in 1.5 trillion. So that's the perspective. And so there's a balancing act. The minister's speech and what he said yesterday, we have to empower the taxpayers. Then also there's the receipt side. The revenue then has to come in order for the government to run. I have divided this very briefly into 3 areas. The first area would be those provisions that allow you to take advantage of the tax structure so that you can be able to contribute meaningfully, but also graduate and grow as you make your contribution. The second one would be easing your liquidity as a taxpayer and allowing cash flow within your business so that you can also be able to contribute to taxes or your revenue mobilization. And the last but not least is those provisions where, and 1 or 2, where we're expanding the tax register and enhancing compliance. So very quickly, the very first one, which is the big one, where the government is getting you to take advantage of the tax structure, is what has been on, but now it is an improvement, it's an amendment, where the tax law is saying that if you're an operator in an industrial park or free zone, and you have invested up to $10 million if you're a foreigner, or $1 million if you're a local, you will be entitled, with the other conditions, you will be entitled to a 10-year tax holiday. Now, of course, government has had your representation, especially for the citizens, for the locals, and this has been lowered for you, for all of us, to $300,000 US. That means that you have your $300,000 US, slightly over 1 billion, you can be able to invest, and if you bring in the machinery and you're going to invest, both in a new and ongoing, you'll be able to get a 10-year tax holiday. I think that's a very good thing. And this time, it has not been restricted to the operators, as we call them in the law. That means it has not been restricted to somebody in the industrial park. Anywhere within the country, you will be entitled to that holiday. Better so, if you're going outside of Kampala, 50 kilometers or so, you need $150,000. You don't need all the $300,000. $150,000, you're getting out of Kampala, you have a 10-year holiday. But just listen to this. There are areas there are certain conditions that you will have to fulfill. One of them, and all of them to the advantage of the Ugandans, one of them is that you have to use local material to boost our productivity here of up to 70%. 2, you have to use local labor, up to again 70%. 3, and this one is very important, because you can use local labor up to 70%, but all of them in the wage bill account for 1%. So the government looked at that, and within there you have your wage bill, your total wage bill as an investor, as a prospective investor, should be at least 70% citizenry. Must be composed of at least 70% of the citizens of this country. So those are the conditions for you to have that exemption, 10-year. And in the interest of time, I'll let you know that this exemption spreads across the tax heads. You will be exempted for VAT, you will be exempted for excise duty, you will be exempted from income tax, and also stamp duty to the extent possible, where you will need stamp duty. So that's a big one in that area. But then not everybody can have $150,000. Not everybody can have the $300,000. So there is a provision that caters for the small taxpayers. The small taxpayers have always asked, and where do we benefit? What is in it for me? Now, there's a provision for the small taxpayers. And the small taxpayers, we have always related with you in the presumptive tax regime. And in that presumptive tax regime, we had the percentage for those who have records. Ideally, we would have the 1%. But this has been reduced, and the bands, and I may not go through the bands now because of time, but the bands will allow you to take advantage of a lower tax incidence. If you're below 10 million, you will not pay tax, turnover, because this is essentially a turnover tax. If you're below 10 million, you will not pay tax. If you're slightly above 10 million, but you're not exceeding 30, you pay 0.4%. Or if you have no records at all, and we have used the estimate, you pay 80,000. That's for the small taxpayers out there who are enjoying the presumptive regime. Very quickly, you will pay 200,000 or 0.5% if your turnover, gross turnover, exceeds 30 million but does not exceed 50 million. That last, another bracket in there, as you graduate, you have a turnover that exceeds 50 million, but it does not exceed 80 million. You pay 400,000, or 0.6 of your annual turnover. Lastly, before we get into the VAT bracket, if you have a turnover that is above 80 million but does not go above 150, you will pay 900,000. I think this will ease your burden and also purposes of accountability. Very quickly, I will go into the one of easing your liquidity and cash flows. Here, it is mostly VAT, and we are saying that in the VAT law, when you apply for VAT, especially the manufacturers, would allow you input tax credit for only 6 months before your registration. And that would take into account what you had in stock, both capital and revenue, and would only allow it up to 6 months. Now, in order for you to take more of the credit, this has been extended to 12 months. So now, as a manufacturer, as you register for VAT, you can look back up to 12 months and get tax credit, income tax, input tax up to 12 months. The other one is more to do with the efficiencies that we are seeing in the authority. Many taxpayers opt not to seek their refunds in the VAT, and many of them wish to have offsets. So they keep offsetting. They keep saying if your input tax is higher than your output in the VAT, then you say, okay, let me just offset it. Let me just put it to the next period. I don't want to go through the refund process. And now, what the law is saying for you, that in order to get back liquidity into the markets, into the economy, allow you cash flows. If you do this conveniently for 3 months, after the 3rd month, we'll ask you to seek for a refund. We'll ask you to seek for a refund so that you can be able to get that money back into your business. Those are two major provisions in the VAT. But I also believe that when you go straight into the stamp duty, many of you who have been seeking loans, you've had that small inconvenience where you would have to pay on your loan instruments. Now there's going to be nil charge on all loan instruments. Previously we had a cap for 3 million, but now it doesn't matter how much your loan is, it's going to be nil. The last category is a compliance one, expanding the register. We need to get this. The balancing act that I talked about earlier is necessary for all of us as we contribute. And therefore there are areas that the tax administrator must be helped in order to bring as many people onto the tax register, but also even those who are on, so that whatever is being contributed is accurate. Because you don't pay more and you don't pay less. One of the areas that we are looking at is the introduction of the electronic physical receipting and invoicing system. Now that one you might have heard, because we're already doing a lot of sensitization and a lot of education, and I'm bringing it here. I'm literally doing the sensitization before I can tell you what the law says, because this is an integration of either your system to our system, in case you're that big and it's easier for you to use your system and integrate it with ours, and so that every invoice, the cardinal rule there is that there is no invoice that you'll be able to issue that is not fiscalized. The economists call it that. That means that there's no tax element, and is centrally managed. The issuance is centrally managed. That means URA has allowed it to go out to that customer you're issuing it. So there are people who have those systems, the big ones, and they just have to interlink with ours. But not everybody has that system. So there are others who will just be able to log on to our portal and the URA portal and be able to issue this. While others will have an app which will also be on our portal, and you'll be able to issue. But the others, the smaller ones, and we are not ready with this one. You know, these ones, this star, this, I think they call it the USSD. That one will also come for those phones, and you'll be able to do a very quick code and be able to issue the invoice. Now, why am I bringing it here at this point? I'm bringing it because the law has now required that if you have any expenses that as a result of you purchasing from somebody, that the Commissioner General has already designated as somebody to do the e-invoicing and e-receipting, then that expense must be supported by that e-invoice. Ladies and gentlemen, potential, prospective, and existing taxpayers, that expense, whether it's income tax, whether it's input VAT, that invoice, that receipt must be supported by that invoice that was authorized by the authority. There's so many questions that will come through. And we're doing sensitization to this effect so that we ease your burden. Of course, it is going to help you in record keeping. It's going to help both parties, also our side. It's going to help you as you deal with your clients to make sure that you're dealing with compliant clients. The other one in the area of compliance as well is the area of stamp duty. The professionals have licenses that they acquire on an annual basis and certificates, and we are saying at a minimum fee of 100,000, can we please have that license registered and known to us? One, because we'll be able to know the professionals own, and it's a minimum fee. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are many other areas, but those are very pertinent areas in those three categories, and I can see Mildred is on my case now. She wants me to leave the podium. But very briefly, in the last 2 or so minutes, there are other administrative measures that we are using or we are going to implement in order to facilitate you get a good grasp of these new amendments. One of them I've already mentioned is the introduction of the e-invoicing, but the other one is also those who are entitled to withholding tax exemption. It's now online. You don't have to chase and go after your application. It is online, and come 1st July, we will issue that list, and if you're compliant, you will be compliant. There's nothing else you have to do. Tax clearing certificates, same story. There's nothing else you have to do. And when she gives me another opportunity, I'll come back on the voluntary disclosure. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a very tax compliant year to come, and all the best as you do your business. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mchivi. There are lots of questions in that regard, so I will definitely give you more time to speak, and quite a number of other speakers coming through. And once again, Honorable Eli Karuhanga will be coming up next. He's the chairman of the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, and will particularly be paying attention to priority areas for promoting the private sector growth. And Honorable Eli, as you do come through, the biggest question many people are asking is, what exactly does the private sector need to get from this budget? What is the need for the private sector? But also, there's been a particular concern of the private sector being too weak in Uganda, especially in taking advantage of government procurement, especially when it comes to infrastructure and the oil sector, and yet the money actually ends up going back to the creditors. What exactly is the private sector foundation and the other players doing about this, as you do come through shortly? Honorable Eli Karuhanga, over to you.
Mildred and Maurice, thank you for the job you are doing, and thank you, the media, NTV, NBS, and all the other TV stations. I want to speak a language which is very simple language understood by people on the street, because there is an attraction to become very attractive, speak economics language, and for people to get lost with all these sophisticated terms. So as much as possible, I'll try my best to be very simple. I pray God for that. First, I want to appreciate and thank the government led by the President for protecting the lives of the people of Uganda during this COVID-19 pandemic period. We take this for granted, but we haven't lost anybody yet. Yet, in more sophisticated countries, more organized than ourselves, some countries have lost more people than they lost in the World War, plus the one they lost in Vietnam combined. And so it is very difficult for us. Sometimes we take things for granted. But this management of this pandemic by Ugandans and by government, we must applaud the efforts of the National Task Force, the efforts of the Prime Minister and the President, and the entire leadership. So that's one point that must be recognized. The second point of appreciation that I want us to note as we think about how to collect more taxes is to recognize that Uganda has 75% of its population under the age of 30. I want to repeat that. We have to recognize that 75% of the population of Uganda is under the age of 30. Now, if I had said 40, 50 years and below, that's a very intimidating figure. We are the second youngest country in the world. So here we go looking for taxes from these people. We have explored the best to be able, we have to make it possible for them to make money so that we can make money for taxes from them. So we have also taken some other points in consideration, that Uganda is lucky, it's a green country, it's an agricultural country. We can take advantage of this opportunity that Mother Nature and God gave us. So, if we turn this green into growing sugar cane and tobacco and cotton and tea, we will make billionaires of these owners of sugar estates, sugar barons. But the population I've talked about will not participate in owning commercial farms, sugar farms, tea estates. They will not do that. So where can we be? With the young population looking for broadening the tax base, we have to go into what is possible. What is possible? What is possible is for us to go in growing agricultural commodities that can quickly sell, i.e. vegetables, like Kenya, like Ethiopia. But we are more positioned to do that than those countries. And we can even have urban agriculture by growing on small pieces of land in town and export a lot of things. And young people will find room for that. So, the other point I want to recognize is that recently, since September, I have observed an amazing story. Uganda government has been listening to private sector. And we have worked with them, and we made proposals into this budget. So we added what we sent to the president. We sent, I think, a 23-page letter. We then met the Prime Minister with the Presidential Investors Roundtable and private sector. We've held numerous meetings with the Minister of Finance proposing tax proposals. And believe it or not, the listening people who are listening to us, the government has adopted 78% of our proposals. This is new. This is completely amazing. And it is laudable. Now the challenge is in its implementation. Now that they have adopted 78% of our proposals, how do we make sure that these proposals which we have made will be implemented? And implemented, monitored, and evaluated. So, like I said, when the URA started a series of think tank discussions, I was lucky to be invited at that time during Madame Kajina's regime to be asked to be the one to give the inaugural speech to kick off those things. And I said, let's make Uganda incorporated. Let's have a review of how the government and private sector are organized. Let's make Uganda run as if it's a company, a publicly owned company, where ministers are directors, where people who work there are vetted. They are there because they are able to do that job. They are fitting in that area. Directors of companies, you just don't pick friends from your constituency and make them chairman of parastatals, etc. So let's organize ourselves and make a very efficient administration. And let's work like this. So I was very pleased again when at the beginning of this year, the Prime Minister accepted that we shall have quarterly meetings with him and his government, and that each ministry will have an MOU with private sector, so that we can be able to account and look at this budget and make proposals, make sure that the ministry is implementing this, and that the youth are participating in each ministry, and that the whole country can come up together. So what Operation Wealth Creation is doing in growing this agriculture and giving seeds, people must find markets. And that part of this digitalization process which is coming up now, ICT, that the youth participate in selling and marketing agricultural produce. So this is just to round up how we can create a tax base. Now, I want to congratulate the Commissioner General and your team, because what has actually happened in simple English is that we are seeing URA as transparent. There is belief that you are breathing fresh air in the organization. the fear that before you pay tax, you have to negotiate how much you pay on the side to make life easy for you seems to be going. So there is a kind of integrity process that seems to have come into URA. And I wish you the best, Commissioner General, because I know you are capable of introducing integrity in URA. And so we pray for you. But now, there is a new thing which has also happened post-COVID. Import substitution, local content, boo-boo. Let me tell you, fellow listeners, this, I was joking the other day. I said this is like when we crossed during the struggle, when we crossed Katonga, because there was no turning back. Once we introduced local content, import substitution, buy Uganda, build Uganda, then we have something stuck. Then we have something stuck. And I cannot emphasize this, but I want to thank Parliament for coming up with that law. This is critical, and I'm waiting for the day when the President signs and assents to the bill on national content. Okay, now for us who pay taxes and for people in private sector, taxes take away what you have earned, and therefore they inhibit investment which you would have used if you had not paid that tax. So when you pay that tax, you deny yourself that money, which was very cheap because you had got it and there's no interest. Now, then you have to go and borrow money from the bank to be able to continue with the business. And what interest rate do you pay? They ask you for 21%. So I want to thank the central bank for coming down and introducing the new, what they call CBR, to 7%. This is I want to thank the central bank because that is going to force commercial banks to stop us paying 21% interest on the money we borrow, which we would not have had to borrow if we had kept the money, if we didn't pay the tax. But we have paid the tax in order for us to have the government function. So, and we want to pay the tax. It is very important that we pay the tax. So, the interest rates the central bank has introduced are very, very important. And I want to thank the central bank because, as you know, I have been involved in the banking system. The previous stance the central bank held was, it was uncompromising. In fact, the new supervisor for banking, Mr. Twino, I want also to thank you in person, because the way you have relaxed the situation with central banks is so important. Now we can hope to borrow money from banks, and I'm sure that the commercial banks are going to bring their rates down. Now, it seems to me...
As you prepare to wind up, Dr. Eli?
Yes. It seems to me, Mildred, that the issues I had wanted to raise, maybe I'll raise them in the second bite when you give me a chance. But we have quite a few things we want to say, but I'll hold them for now. I just want to make those opening remarks, and given a chance, then we can come to specific tax proposals.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Eli. But would you want to use maybe a minute just to highlight a few of those so that URA can definitely get those? Just highlight them in a minute or so. Yes, please. Yes.
Well, first of all, there is a thing called corporation tax. It's 30%. It means, in effect, it means the government has got 30% of each and everybody's business. So government is a shareholder in my company, in your company. and is therefore a key shareholder, is a substantial, in many cases, it's the majority shareholder. Because if you have 30% and you have got 5 partners, the government is the biggest shareholder in my company. For example, in my law firm, Kampala Associates and Advocates, we are 11 partners. But we are 12 because government is one of us. And they take 30% of whatever we make. So they are the majority shareholders in my firm. So they should make sure that my law firm is very successful. And that should be the case everywhere. So once the government behaves like a shareholder, then it will make it easy for people to understand in URA that we need them to be on our side. And I'm happy to see that this is happening.
Okay.
Right now, there are so many cases. Let me just conclude this. There are so many cases in the tax tribunal and in court with URA. Let me tell you, if we resolve those issues like people who are shareholders in each other's company, the government can, in a stroke of 6 months, collect so much money that they can pay domestic arrears, they can pay VAT refunds, they can pay people, and they can introduce sufficient liquidity in the market. And at the same time, URA would show a lot of money in their pockets, and the ministry would be happy. Let me stop there, and then I'll continue with the others.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Eli, we'll definitely be getting back to you in our question session, but we need to now proceed with our next speaker, also coming in from the Uganda Revenue Authority, from the Commissioner Customs. I would like to invite Mr. Abel Kagumire to talk about the customs tax amendments, the incentives and opportunities for Ugandans, and if you could just highlight a bit of the missing links briefly. Welcome.
Thank you, Mildred. All protocol observed, and dear Ugandans, my name is Abel Kagumire, Commissioner Customs at Uganda Revenue Authority. I know I don't have a lot of time. I'll try to be as brief as possible. What is very clear is that in line with the government policy on industrialization, import substitution, talk of local content, talk of boo-boo, international trade taxes have continued to decline. We used to collect up to 12 trillion. As I speak now, we are struggling between 6.5 and 7 trillion. So I want to tell fellow Ugandans that the focus of government is on how we can increase local production, how we can promote our exports, and how we can industrialize. So what has Customs been doing? Customs has focused more on facilitation of trade. And we have made sure that all the essential raw materials needed by the manufacturers come in time. We have made sure that all the essential commodities needed by Ugandans come in time, working closely with other development partners and other countries in the supply chain. So, in line with that, I wanted to tell Ugandans and colleagues here and members that you need to take opportunities in some of these areas. One is the textile sector. We have benefactories coming up in the manufacture of textiles, and so in that process we are going to put high tariffs on imported textiles. So they are going to increase from 25% to 35%. Now that tells you if we've been getting a lot from garments, textiles, we will have to support our local industries. In the agricultural sector, there are products which we produce locally and we don't need to import them. Irish potatoes, we have a lot of honey in West Nile, processed tea and coffee, meat and chicken, tomato sauce, sausage, sunflower oil, bread, spreads, ginger, tomato sauce, all these have been adjusted 60%. So if you want to enjoy ketchup from America, pay at 60%. But we feel we have enough farmers who are growing our tomatoes here. In the manufacturing sector, import duty has also been increased on items to 35%. On tiles, we have Goodwill, if you are aware. They claim to have capacity to give us all the tiles we need as Uganda and even export. So we are trying to support the Kapeka industry on tiles. The toys, we feel toys, if you want to buy toys, please pay us dearly. Television sets, yes. Shoe polish, wigs, doors, windows, and their flames. Because tarpaulins, ceramic toilet seats, we have a factory already in Kapeka, in the industrial park, cosmetics and soap. So if you really want to enjoy those which are imported, then you have to pay at 35%. In the transport sector, we feel we should support people who are involved in commercial transport. So tractor heads for movement of goods. Of recent, you've been seeing during COVID, most of the truck drivers are Kenyan or they are foreign. We have very few Ugandan truck drivers. Why? We don't have enough fleet. So in this area, tractor heads are going to be at 0% on import duty. And then motor vehicles for the transport of goods, which have a gross weight of more than 5 tons but not exceeding 20 tons, will pay only 10%. Then vehicles which have 20 tons and above, those will be 0%. And we also have motorcycles. The border industry is also growing. Those who are assembling, who bring them in knockdown condition, will be paying at 10%. Of course, you all know very well that manufacturing starts with assembly. So we are trying to encourage people to do a lot of assembly. And in that process, we have got factories which now assemble flat irons, assembled speakers, like we are speaking through here in Uganda. We have people who are doing baby diapers. And so we have reduced import duty from 10% to 0%. Even on mobile phones, inputs of recent, you saw our first consignment, which went. In the mining sector, another area we need to focus on as Ugandans is oil and gas equipment because of the pipeline which is in the offing. So all the tax is exempted just to address the equipment that we need to fast track the pipeline. We have also tax incentives which Ugandans need to take care of. We have VAT deferment on plant and machinery. This means you can bring in all the plant and machinery you need, you use it, start producing, and then that's when we can come to you to look for VAT after production. Also, inputs in agriculture are tax exempted. The Commissioner General alluded to that this morning. Fertilizers, pesticides, seeds for sowing, and so many others. And machinery for processing agricultural products, because we are encouraging agro-processing, they are all tax exempted. Unfortunately, COVID has also affected the hotel and the tourism sector, but there are exemptions in that area as well on tourist vehicles, so Ugandans can take advantage of that. And then television sets which will be used in the hotels, and the washing machines, the fridges, and air conditioners, linen and furniture. So you realize that actually the focus of government is more to do with how do we grow industries? How can we promote manufacturing? I know Ugandans love imported items, but COVID has really showed us that we can survive without imported items. So the focus of the Customs Department is now going to be more on how can we get these inputs for our manufacturers? How can we help the ordinary Ugandan to be able to do business. In the process, we shall improve on our balance of payments and balance of trade, so that we are able to trade with other partners and we're able to export and we improve on our export bill. That is what I had to share in the short period of time they gave me. I wait for questions that may arise along. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Abel, and thank you so much for being precise. We are chasing up with time because we need to engage much more. There are lots of questions coming in from the public that we will need to have answered. Up next will be Madame Jen Nalunga. Ms. Jen Nalunga is the country representative of CIATINI, that is Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. Better said as CIATINI because that's a mouthful. But Madame Jen will be speaking to stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, the jobs, the businesses, and industrial recovery. And as CIATINI, we would like to know from you what could be the missing gaps in the tax policies out of the research that you have done. And I feel I would love to give you the honor to speak from your chair. Is that okay with you?
Okay.
All right, please go ahead, a few minutes.
This is okay. Okay, thank you so much, Mildred. And good afternoon, fellow citizens. Good morning, fellow citizens. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance and its agencies for the partnership and for their open door policy. We don't take that for granted. Because of time, I will just look at, because government has put in place a number of tax measures, I will just not say what's good, but how we can make those tax measures better. First of all, I will start with tax measures, the stimulus package, which Mr. Muchibi has talked about, the issue of tax incentives and exemptions, for example, the 10-year tax holiday. We have had a challenge with tax incentives and exemptions. In fact, when you look at our write-up, our research there, we put there our issues regarding tax exemptions and tax holidays. Okay. So we are the issue which we want to point out is that it's good our companies are.
Maybe you could move.
Okay.
Yeah. We do apologize. TV audio is getting from one of the mics.
Okay. So I was raising the issue of the tax exemptions and tax incentives, and we are proposing that we are happy about the tax holidays and the fact that there are conditionalities of using local materials, local labor, and also the wages. But what we have realized is that there is no report back, because this isn't the first time that the Ministry of Finance is providing these incentives, but the companies which are getting them are not using local materials, they are not using local labor, and when they use local labor, the wages are minimal and the working conditions are not very, very good. You know, so we need to be able to government should do an audit, get value for money, so that we know that our money is really used very well. Another issue regarding the tax revenue measures which have been put in place, there has been an increase on gas oil from Uganda shillings 808 per litre to 1,300 per litre. And we are proposing that there shouldn't be that increase, because when you increase fuel, everything goes up. Number 3, on the issue of pay as you earn, we are happy that government is rescheduling the pay as you earn payment, but the day of reckoning will come our point on pay as you earn is that the threshold should be revised upwards. Today, people paying 230,000, that's about $64 are paying pay as you earn. And for the issue of equity and also reducing inequality and ensuring that people have some spending money in their pockets, that threshold should be maybe increased up to 600 or 500,000. And we have to remember that pay as you earn was last adjusted in 2013. So that one, we are really begging that it should be raised. People are really poor. Another issue which I want to raise is the issue of the revenue cycle. When we are talking about mobilizing domestic resources, the whole revenue cycle is very important. How you mobilize, how you allocate, and how you utilize will determine how you are going to mobilize again. So I want to talk about the issue of allocation of resources to the productive sector. When you look at our budget to agriculture, 2.8%, to trade, 0.3%. But when you look at the theme of the budget, the theme of NDP3, we are talking about import substitution, we are talking about businesses, reviving the economy, and we are giving the key ministry just 0.3%. We have been here talking about UNBS issues of standards. We can't trade without standards. You know, as we all know, we have a self-ban with EU because of standards. Our coffee, our maize is being rejected even in Kenya here because of standards. So it's very important that we put money in the Ministry of Trade Industry, because it's a key ministry if we are talking about reviving the economy. The issue of tax supporting import substitution is very critical. Mr. Kagumire has talked about that. Increasing tariffs on what we are going to produce. If we are going into textile, it's good that we have to reduce import tariffs. But again, we need to consider whether these import tariffs are really effective to support the industries. I don't know whether 35% is effective or not, but like the CG pointed out, you are doing research. I think you need to do research to be able to come up with the effective import tariffs to be able to protect our industries. And on that, I think we need also to reconsider the issue of export taxes. I know we have a few export taxes, but we need to increase those export taxes so that we discourage the export of raw materials. I also want just briefly to give a few proposals on how we can be able to broaden and maybe deepen the tax base equitably and fairly, because the whole issue is not just revenue, but it's also the way you are raising it. Is it equitably, or is it the poor who are paying more? One, I think it's important to reassess VAT on consumables. It's hurting the most poor people, especially the women. We need also to review the tax rates on products like tobacco, the fizzy drinks, which I won't mention, cigarettes, sports betting, for health reasons, but also in order to keep society sane when it comes to sports betting. Other countries have banned sports betting, but we can tax it out of our country. I think it's also important that we address the challenges in the local government revenue mobilization. Very, very critical, and we are happy that in the DRM, the Domestic Resource Mobilization Strategy, it's there, but there are leakages there. And also decentralization was about taking services to the people. The issue of taxation of extractive sector, beyond oil, we have so many, minerals. We have the marble, we have the gold, it's a cash cow. And I think, again, in your research, SG, I think you need to put an eye there. The taxation of e-commerce, digital goods and services, they are steadily growing in Uganda, like globally, but we need that. Minister of Finance, URA, you need to put a regulatory framework, a strong one, on how to tax the digital economy. I know there are negotiations in the WTO going on, so the Minister of Finance and Minister of Trade have to sit together to make sure that we have a policy space for us to be able to effectively tax the digital economy. We need to harmonize tax laws and rates within the region, the ESC. There is a study which is out, which was done in March, called Money Trail. It found out that Uganda and Kenya are losing a lot of revenue from just one item, beer, across the border, smuggling of beer. But it's because our tax rates are not harmonized. So that's an area which we can use to plug the leakages. We need also to address the regional trade. By the end of, before the lockdown, that Rwanda border was closed, we had all these milk wars. For me, I think this is the time to start talking about how to address that. There are also tax leakages, like the double taxation agreement. I know we have been working with the Minister of Finance on this issue, but those are also tax leakages which need to be plugged. Lastly, we need to be mindful of the commitments which we are making with third parties. We are negotiating, for example, the Continental Free Trade Area. Mr. Kagumire, what you have pointed out, these rates, you can find that what we are negotiating in that Continental Free Trade Area is so different that we are just liberalizing more. So we need to be mindful of that. We need to be mindful of the CET, the ESC, our CET. Is it effective to help us to do import substitution? And there are so many other negotiations, trade negotiations going on, which are affecting our tax rates. Lastly, I think we need to strengthen fiscal discipline. We need to have show prudent use of our resources. There are things which we can shelve for the time being. For example, the new cities, they are increasing administrative cost. I understand, I read somewhere, Minister of Local Government put aside 130 billion for the new cities. Why do we need the new cities? We need to show that we are in a difficult situation, and we need to cut our cost accordingly. Thank you so much. I think I can stop here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nalunga, for that. And immediately, right about this time, we want to take a very short break. It will be exactly 5 minutes, and that's for TV purposes. Lots of advertisers whose adverts have to be playing, actually, and for us probably just to stretch out. And that will take us exactly 5 minutes from now. We will be back, and also after the break, we will have our next panel. So for now, we want to take a very short break and be right back.
ensure that your favorite newspaper, radio, and television broadcasting channels are always readily available to you. As part of our precautionary health and safety measures against the COVID-19 transmission, we ensure that before accessing the premises, our staff wear a mask, have their temperature checked and hands sanitized at the different checkpoints. We encourage our staff to maintain a distance of at least 6 feet from each other. We place high emphasis on routine disinfecting of work surfaces, equipment, and touch areas, including our courier services. Our vendors ensure to wear masks at all times and sanitize during any transaction with the customer. Nation Media Group is proud to keep you informed and updated while maintaining your health and safety as our #1 priority. We encourage you to always wear a mask, practice good hygiene, follow Ministry of Health guidelines, and stay safe.
Child poverty hampers children's development, educational outcomes, job prospects, health, and behavior, often resulting in the chronic intergenerational transmission of poverty, with close to 60% of the population below 18 years of age and over 75% below the age of 35 years. Children's cognitive development represents Uganda's greatest natural resource. Moreover, Uganda's vision of becoming a middle-income country by 2040 remains highly contingent upon our collective ability to safeguard children's rights to contribute to national development. Sadly, children remain at the periphery as issues that directly affect them are discussed and policies formulated. Any calamity that befalls society has severe impact on children because they lack both the voice to air out their concerns but also the ability to help themselves. Compassion International Uganda, in partnership with NTV Uganda, will host a dialogue under the theme "Every Child Known, Loved, and Protected" this Thursday, 25th June 2020 at 11 a.m. The dialogue brings together expert minds to discuss the future of children and how to set the Ugandan child on track to dream big and grow to their fullest potential.
For those whose cars are still under lockdown, it's very important to make sure that during the extension, your cars are parked safely to protect the battery and the hygiene of the car. Disconnect the negative terminal of your battery to make sure that it doesn't discharge fully. And for the hygiene, it's important to make sure that when you open your car, you don't see cockroaches running around or signs of rodent droppings. Now, to prevent that, make sure that you leave no droppings of food particles or food items in your car. Hoover the car and clean it before you park it and lock the doors. Rodents particularly are very harmful to car wiring and circuitry because they bite the circuits and the wires or damage your upholstery, and you'll not be able to start the car or enjoy riding in it. Twedeco, every life matters.
This message was brought to you by Viva Energy and NTV Uganda.
Like the sound of life itself, Honor Fresh Fruit Juice is refreshing and certainly satisfying. Honor Juice is tasty, natural, and healthy. A taste of Honor will taunt your taste buds, leaving you in a storm of refreshment. It is splendid, a gift from Mother Nature to you. Time after time, sip after sip.
Your Fridays shall never be the same again. DJ Brian has got you covered with the illest skills on the wheels of steel.
Laba silhouette shot. Into vya chizungu like NTV does it, you know.
Wind the week down with DJ Brian and Dagen Nice as they bring you the hottest mixes in town. On the DJ Mix Show this Friday at 10 p.m. where the party never stops.
Run the track!
Put your dancing shoes on. It's going to get lit. With VJ Baby Love, DJ Mark Rebel, Mr. Mosh, and MC Esco. The Dance Party, this Saturday at 10 p.m.
Elika Ruhanga. Elika Ruhanga is a business person who has been at the helm of 8 different companies. Presently, he holds the position of chairperson for Private Sector Foundation Uganda, Uganda Soft Drinks Manufacturers Association, chairman of Uganda Chambers of Mines and Petroleum, chairman for Development Finance Corporation of Uganda Limited, chairman British American Tobacco Uganda Limited, and director and legal counsel at Canmin Resources Limited. He is also on the board of Nile Breweries Limited and Marasa Holdings Limited, and the chairman at Uganda Think Tank Foundation, president for Rotary Club of Kampala, senior partner at Kampala Associated Advocates, chairman governing council president at Alternative Dispute Resolution, and a member of World Trade Law Association, the Rotary Club of Kampala. Join him as he takes part in a 2-day e-conference dubbed the Post-Budget Dialogue 2020 under the theme Stimulating the Economy to Safeguard Livelihoods, Jobs, Businesses and Industrial Recovery. John Musinguzi Rujoki. He is a Ugandan mathematician and corporate executive who serves as the Commissioner General of Uganda Revenue Authority. In 2000, Rujoki served as the head of Finance and Audit Department of the Special Revenue Protection Services, which was a military unit attached to Uganda Revenue Authority. In addition to his other assignments, Rujoki serves as the chairman of the board of the National Information Technology Authority, NITA Uganda, since October 2019. In his capacity as Commissioner General, he sits on the 7-person board of directors of the Uganda Revenue Authority. Join him as he takes part in a 2-day e-conference dubbed the Post-Budget Dialogue 2020 under the theme Stimulating the Economy to Safeguard Livelihoods, Jobs, Businesses and Industrial Recovery.
We are bringing you day 2 of the e-conference post-budget, and we want to thank you for joining us. If you're joining us online and you're joining us on TV, we want to thank you so much for joining us, our audiences on television, UBC, NBS, NTV, and S24, and all the social media platforms where you are. This session will be taking some of your questions, time allowing. We have a lot of questions, but we're hoping we can take as many as we can with this new panel that has joined me. Allow me to also introduce them when they will be speaking, so we can actually save some time, and I will come to that a little later. But I wanted to begin with Clara Mira. She's the IMF country representative. I'm not so sure if she's ready with us. Clara, if you're ready, I'm happy for you to talk to us on Uganda's fiscal and monetary policies in promoting economic growth and development. Clara, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Please go ahead.
I hope you can hear me well.
Yes,
yes, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So good morning or good afternoon, and all protocols observed. Thank you so much for having me and having us at the International Monetary Fund join this very useful conversation. So the topic that you have just mentioned is the fiscal and monetary policies that are being applied today to promote economic growth and development. I would like to start just by saying that the current situation that we are living in is really unprecedented. So we are living very unusual times and very unprecedented times. This is not like the post-budget dialogue that we had last year or in years before. The shock is of an unprecedented nature and dimensions. The uncertainties are very large. I think it's important to take this into account when we look into what can be done now and what should be done in the medium term. Just to let you know that later today, we will be releasing the IMF World Economic Outlook. This is an update that we will release today. The key message that we are going to see there is that we are in the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression. So this is really a very, very severe shock that the world economy is experiencing. Last year, the world grew at nearly 3%, 2.9%. In April, we projected that because of COVID, the world growth was going to be negative. World growth was going to be minus 3% in 2020. Now, the numbers that are getting out later today are going to be even worse than that. So the world is going to be growing less than the minus 3 that we projected only 2 months ago. When we look at Uganda, the latest data that UPOS has released shows that growth is very likely to more than half. So originally we had projections of 6, 6.5, etc. Last year, revised data also shows growth at 6.8. This year, we might be at around 3. 3.1 is the latest, the preliminary estimates. So the health pandemic and all the supply side disruptions that came with it, the sharp decline in external demand and in domestic demand because of the necessary containment measures have really taken a toll in the Ugandan economy. And we've also seen a sharp decline in foreign direct investment, some decline also in remittances. So all of this is expected to affect growth. The social impact is also expected to be very large. We've been looking at data, and the Ministry of Finance has been compiling some data showing that poverty could increase by as much as 2.6 million people. So this could really threaten Uganda's impressive strides in poverty reduction over the last decade or so. And we see specific sectors, the informal sector particularly, many of which are women, the refugees, etc. They are particularly vulnerable. So they really need to be targeted in the responses. So when we look at
Yes, Clara, I'm not so sure if we've lost your audio. All right, I think we did lose Clara's audio. We want to apologize for that. And as soon as we do have her, we will be able to continue.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. And ensure that both your video and audio are on. Go ahead.
Just, I don't know what happened. Sorry for that.
Yes, Clara? All right. There's a small technical hitch on this end, and we apologize for that, Clara. We'll come to you, Clara. Just stay with us. When we can, we shall come back to you. I want to come to you, gentlemen, who are here, but I wanted to start with the Commissioner Tax, the Director Tax, Ministry of Finance, Moses Kagwa. You were sitting here since the beginning today, and today is specifically looking at how we can actually finance this budget, your budget that was put together. You have a huge toll you've placed on URA. I'm told we're revising our targets. Initially, the targets suggested for us, with Amos and others, was higher than the current target. But I'm happy for you now to speak to us on that, because specifically the attention everyone is who's in this room and everyone watching is wondering, how are you going to be able, first of all, to meet the demands of the budget, because the resource envelope that we are here to support the CG on is shrinking. We know why, and amidst COVID-19, we're wondering whether we are going to actually meet those obligations that we've set out to achieve.
Thank you, Maurice.
Please, yes, you can. We'll hear. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Maurice. Good afternoon, everybody. Of course, when we projected our revenues in December, and that's what we took to Parliament, we had a figure of 21,809 billion. But with COVID, we have had to revise our projections for next year to about 19,878 billion. So there is already a gap, a funding gap of about 2 trillion. How are we going to finance this? We don't want to go into borrowing because a lot of times we do resort to borrowing to bridge the gap. What we are actually doing now, because when you look at our interest payments, for example, for next year, it's about 4 trillion, just the interest payments. So if you are to borrow more, that means that you may have to pay more interest next year, and that will make the situation terrible. So we are trying, what are we trying to do? We are trying to look at some of the areas where we can cut the budget. That's why I think when the minister was reading his budget speech, he was very clear. He said, I'll come back to you, because the budget I presented to you was a pre-COVID budget. Now I'll have come back to you. And there are certain things that maybe we can look at in the budget that could be revised. Things like internal travel, we are not traveling. Foreign travel, nobody is traveling out of this country. We have been having a lot of conferences. So things like allowances for meals, we are looking into some of these soft spots and see what will cut. And maybe also going to slow on some of our programs.
The challenge was, and it was captured on day one, was that your recurrent budget is about 19 point something trillion, and you're asking him to collect that money. Actually, it's about 18 trillion. So your excess over and above your recurrent is just over 1 trillion shillings, and that is the only money you're going to have available for development. And so it means, and it's obvious mathematics for everyone, that you must borrow.
Not necessarily, because our expenditure budget, for example, a lot of it is financed externally, so that is not affected. What is being affected mostly would be the domestic budget. I wish I had the figures here. I would take you through them to show you that, for example, the external financing for our budget is about 9 trillion, more than that. So it's the domestic, mostly the recurrent budget that is being affected.
All right. The Honorable Lugolobi, who is the chair of the Budget Committee of Parliament, Honorable Amos Lugolobi, you've already raised a red flag, and because we're speaking budget, it's important to get your context of the red flag raised, because you were part of this 8-month-long process to develop the budget. That budget was before COVID happened, and then COVID happened, and then there were meant to be realignments, which Moses Kagwa is speaking to, and that is underway. But then you're saying the budget given to us is not exactly, or the read to us is not exactly what you as the committee approved and Parliament passed.
Yes, thank you so much. There is a problem. I think we have. I think we are in a kind of.
If you could remove your mask, otherwise we will not hear you. We know you're protecting yourself.
Okay.
Now at least there's evidence you've been protecting yourself.
Yes, the budget we have is a 45.5 trillion shilling budget, and the budget we approved had provided for 21.8 trillion as revenue that we shall generate, both tax and non-tax revenue. It means that the balance has actually to be borrowed, both externally and domestically. Officially, that's the budget we have until the minister comes back to Parliament, and proposes new measures. And you realize that at the time we passed the budget, the theme was one of industrialization for job creation. Now the theme has changed, as you read the budget, to stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods. So the theme then has since changed, but the budget has officially not changed. And you know quite well that the financial year is about to end. Secondly, you know that we're a country that is overborrowed, you know, because a budget of 45.5 trillion, and we are now thinking of 19 trillion shillings, which again might be difficult to collect. I want to sympathize with the Commissioner General, given the circumstances we are in. Now, a borrowing of over 20 trillion into the budget, I think is a huge borrowing. And we're extremely running out of these concessional loans. And I've seen my brother Kagwa running to the market to borrow domestic market, which is extremely costly, you know, to the country. And that's why he has told you that we are paying over 4 trillion shillings in interest. Discretionary resources that we have at our disposal to spend on the critical priorities is increasingly reducing over the years, you know, as a result of borrowing, over borrowing. We are told that for as long as we do not exceed 50% in terms of our debt to GDP, we are safe. But practically, when you look into the details of the budget, you see that the situation is increasingly becoming unsustainable. Secondly, is the issue of the structure of the budget. On the surface of it, you'd see that the budget strategy is focusing on industrialization, agriculture, you know, those productive sectors. So when you read the budget strategy, particularly articulated in the budget framework paper. However, as they always say that the devil is in the detail, if you go into the details, you realize that the numbers provided for what you would think are the critical sectors to industrialize this country are not so impressive. I'll give you the example. Whereas in the budget you have about 6 trillion shillings on works and transports, the roads, etc. The provision you have for industry is only about 110 billion shillings. And you begin wondering, what are we constructing these roads for? I thought these roads are to facilitate the movement of goods and services. Now here we are constraining the productive capacity of the country, but we are over-investing in the supportive sectors to these productive sectors. So you are in kind of a quagmire, you know, and we are likely to end up in this kind of stalemate that we are talking about today, that the situation is only worsening. I'll tell you, at the beginning of the term of this government in 2016, they prepare what they call the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. And in that charter, there are commitments. The commitment in there is that by the end, in the medium term, we shall have attained 3% fiscal deficit. As we speak now, this year that we are concluding, we are at 8.7%. The situation was really worsening. And now with increased borrowing, it will worsen further. So my point here is that we really need to restructure this budget. And I hope the restructuring they are doing is intended to support the productive sectors that will revive the economy, you know, because it's those sectors that create many jobs for our people, you know, but they are the ones that are marginally financed. I think that's my take on this.
All right, I'll come back to you, Honorable, because there's a couple of questions we have for you. But I wanted to go to Clara, because Clara, you're back, I can see you. So Clara, if you can hear me, you were still saying something on the inclusiveness of our budget, or the lack of that. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know how much you heard. I was saying that these are exceptional times and that the measures are exceptional by nature, that this is not a budget like last year's budget. And indeed, it's a bit difficult to really go in depth now into the budget because it's a pre-COVID budget, as we all know. So, of course, the work being done to revise the budget is very important and it's very critical. So in that sense, the key principles that really matter in the short term. In the short term, we've been saying that. So key one is, given the unprecedented nature of the shock, one is save lives, but the other one is protect livelihoods as much as possible and prevent excessive economic dislocation. With this, what we mean is that we need to try to keep viable firms alive as much as possible and preserve employment. And also, of course, maintain the functioning of the key sectors, so the regular healthcare, food production, essential infrastructure, etc. So what does this mean, and what does it mean for the budget? It means, on the one hand, we all know that health spending needs to increase. So what was allocated to the health sector is not enough to respond to the crisis. I think this is also a good wake-up call to some extent to remember that it's very important to have good allocations to the social sectors. So not just to respond to COVID, but also going forward. So that's very important. And then the second issue is, how do we cushion the impact of this crisis on people and on businesses? So on the point of people, we really need to look at the most exposed households. And I mentioned earlier that we have the informal sector severely affected by the containment measures, many of which are women, etc. So targeted measures to protect these households are really necessary. And in that sense, social safety nets should be enhanced. And what we've seen is that most countries, what they've done is go to cash transfers. So they've also distributed food, as has been done here, or support with payment of utilities. But also cash transfers are a very good way to be very targeted, very specific, support these households that are having difficulties, prevent them from depleting the little savings or capacity that they have, human capacity, and even support the economy. So this is something important that we think would be useful to have as part of the cards. In terms of the business.
Yes, very quickly. Yes, Clara, I have a minute. Yes.
Do you have a minute? Okay, then let me run. I think the measures that we've seen support business continuity on the URA side. So the temporary tax deferrals are welcome, and temporary tax relief, that's also welcome. We've also heard about repayment of arrears to inject more resources in the economy. That is very welcome. And support liquidity to companies, subsidize loans, guarantees, etc. On the monetary side, I fully agree that the central bank of Uganda, has done a very good job. They have reduced the central bank rate twice. So we were at 9% CBR when the crisis started, and now we are at 7% CBR. This is the lowest it has ever been. And we think this is very positive, and it will help cushion the impact on the private sector. Also, they have allowed banks to restructure loans to borrowers affected by the crisis. This is very important to try to protect the private sector. If we go maybe real quick to the point that has been coming up, which is how do we finance all of this and how do we look at the budget again? Of course, there will be less revenue because of the situation in terms of lower growth, and also because of some of these stimulus measures. So there will be less revenue, and there will be more expenditure on the health side, on the social protection and on the stimulus to the economy. So how do we respond to this? One part that has been mentioned is reallocations, so trying to look at the budget and see what can be moved from one line to the other. That's good. But the other part is, this is an unprecedented crisis. So one point that we think it's important is that international solidarity is also very important, so that countries should also look at what is available and what can they use to finance this shortfall. I agree that the point of debt is important, but given the circumstances and given where Uganda is at, concessional rates, So borrowing, for example, at 0% or borrowing at good terms might help cushion the impact of this shock. And this is partly what Uganda has done already, and what the IMF has supported Uganda already with $491.5 million to bridge this gap. So I think this is an important consideration. It's not just that we cannot borrow at all, but it's important to see how much we borrow. Of course, URA and revenue mobilization has a very key role to play. But we do see that role will also be more important over the medium term, once the crisis has subsided. So over the medium term, we need to see some kind of return to fiscal consolidation, to the domestic revenue mobilization strategy that the Ministry of Finance and URA prepared together, and that it's a very good medium-term plan to enhance revenue collection in Uganda.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Clara, the IMF country representative. Thank you so much. Well, if you're joining us, and I know we have a lot of our participants and those who are watching via Zoom, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We also know there's those of you watching us on the different platforms, social media platforms that belong to the private media stations and UBC, so UBC, NTV, NBS, and S24 platforms. We want to thank you, those of you who are watching on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me come to you, Mr. Francis Kamleger. He's the country senior manager for PwC. Francis, Clara did speak to some of the issues I wanted to ask, because we were looking at that gap we are discussing, the shortfall, the conversation on the revenue, domestic revenue mobilization. That gap and the measures / what would have been a stimulus plan that we've been given, the 11-point stimulus plan, do these address the issues of COVID against our budget? Because the budget, which as Amos has talked to, was pre-COVID. And then COVID happened. And now we had to think through the 11 economic stimulus plan. Does it speak to some of the issues you've captured as tax experts or audit experts? If you could lift the other microphone he was using. Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Maurice, and good afternoon, viewers. At the risk of being controversial, I'm going to say this concept of a budget of pre-COVID, post-COVID can be a bit misleading. Government budgets on a long-term basis, and that budgeting process is underpinned at a very high level, Vision 2030, broken down into 5-year plans of national development plans. So this year's budget comes at the end of NDP 2 and the beginning of NDP 3. What COVID did was to expose our lack of resilience and exposed the underfunding of key sectors of the economy. So whereas it's true that there may be, and there is a very strong case for reallocation from certain sectors to other sectors that have been perennially underfunded, and when COVID came, whether it is health, whether it is education in terms of facilitation of how people can access education services remotely, and lots of other things, food security, for instance, the unplanned urbanization to the extent that government had to go into an intervention of giving people food, and an attempt that partly successful but still not sustainable. I would say that it's really a time of reflecting on the way we have been exposed as a country, as a nation, as a community, and even at personal level in terms I strongly agree with my colleague, the director, that whereas in 45.5 trillion was approved and by Parliament, there is a case for going into that and consider reallocation. Also, even at a household or company, private sector level, we have had to revise our budgets. If you are an individual and you had commenced on a construction project and you're building for the long term, you find that now you have to defer building and focus more on the bread and butter issues. It's for that reason that I believe that projects and big infrastructure projects that are not commenced, much as they were budgeted for and appropriations were made, they should be deferred and focus on the bread and butter issues. You can't tell people to wash their hands all the time when they don't have access to water. 78% of our population have access to water. The other 22% doesn't. And that is now water is life. You know, that's the saying. They say now it's very clear water is life. So however fancy the roads are to their localities, however much you invest in generation power, you have to make sure that those people have access to the bare social services. And again, very briefly, I also I was very encouraged by the remarks from the Commissioner General in terms of very customer-centric revenue authority and focusing on taxpayer education. I've always been a very strong advocate of the revenue authority being an advocate of business, being a facilitator of enterprise, and tax is just a consequence. So if you start off your policy with a target collection and you've not actually taken 3-4 steps, how do we collect 21 trillion or 19 trillion before focusing on facilitating business? You will not get it. So whether it's the domestic revenue mobilization strategy, whether it's the URA 5-year corporate plan, you must have business enterprise at the heart of that. Collaboration, consultation, and sharing information, data and analytics, so that all these taxpayers are partners in development. So I'll stop.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you very much. Let me come back to you, Director Moses Kagwa. The Honorable Lugolobi did mention our fiscal debt to date, and we are being asked, how is it that this fiscal debt, or how is the ministry going to finance this fiscal debt, or have it covered, considering that we have almost come to the end of this year anyway?
Fiscal debt or deficit?
Deficit, sorry.
The deficit is it's projected at 7.5%.
He gave us 8, so close
almost,
to it.
Yes, about 7.5% at the end of the financial year. And of course, in the chart of fiscal responsibility, we had a program that we should be at 3% at the end of this period of NDP. But in that chart of fiscal responsibility and in the Public Finance Management Act, there's a provision that if we do not meet it, or if we have reasons why we cannot meet it, then we go back to Parliament and explain why we can't have it. One of the major reasons why we are having a higher deficit than what we had projected is because we realized that we had a lot of infrastructure deficit. Every time the private sector was crying about lack of enough electricity, so we had to invest in electricity, we have to invest in generation, we have to invest in transmission. We had also to invest in roads, especially the oil roads. Because we are going to start on the oil, we had to make sure that the roads were ready to evacuate that oil. So that those investments that we have done have led us to breach the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. But I think it was for good reason.
All right.
But I also wanted to tell you that our debt, because you also talked about debt, it stood at 13.3 billion at the end of December, with external debt at 8.6 billion dollars. So that's where we are thinking.
All right. I mean, the issue of data keeps coming up in the questions, and I wanted my colleague Mildred, and I'm going to pass this microphone on to her, because we have a lot of questions coming in from our viewers online, and CG, this is where I think most of the questions might come to you. I've cheated exams and looked at most of these questions. They look like they were interested in you taking on most of these questions. So I want to hand over to Mildred, who's going to take us through the questions that came on the different platforms. These questions also include questions from yesterday. So you might notice that some of the feedback is from some of the conversations we had yesterday. Mildred, feel free to take this one, just in case I get an audience question.
Oh, yeah, sure. All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Maurice. So many questions coming through, and I do request that we will be answering to these very briefly and quite quickly. One particularly as well yesterday went to URSB, and I know that URSB is represented. So Maurice will be moving very close to the URSB team, where Honorable Victoria said, it takes forever to register a company, and she can swear if one can register a company in one day. But directly to CG, this is coming in from, I think it was Facebook, where it says the vice of corruption can only be prevented by the authority to sell at the properties of that individual than just arresting them or her. That will help to put back the money lost. I think that you can pay attention to. There are quite many. There is another one that is talking about how can Uganda raise funds to satisfy the budget in this COVID-19 era. If you could just respond to a few of those two.
Thank you, Mildred, for that question, and for the person who sent the question. Yes, we are going to be very deliberate and very systematic on how we handle the issue of corruption. We have started by identifying what causes corruption, and we are addressing the issues that cause corruption. Some of the issues that I already mentioned in my earlier submission: automation of processes will limit the interaction, clear information, more information and empowering of the taxpayers will help reduce the need for corruption. Being transparent, we are going to have things like lifestyle audits for the staff of Uganda Revenue Authority. Everyone should be able to explain what they own and how they earned it, in addition, of course, to the other government measures like IGG and others where we declare what we own. So there are many steps. If we had time, I would go through the detail, but we are being deliberate, we are being systematic, and we will not just ask the corrupt to leave. Where there is evidence, prosecute, and to recover, the law will be followed. But we pledge to be transparent and accountable to the citizens when we are doing this noble tax duty of collecting tax on their behalf. Now, on the issue of collecting tax that will be enough to, revenues that will meet the needs of the country and the budget targets, we will do our best. Once we have closed the revenue leakages and we have adopted technology, and we have consulted the taxpayers, and we have brought more taxpayers on board, and we have nurtured others to come out, I, for one, am not so worried about the target. It may take us longer to get there, but I have a conviction, and together with the team of very, very committed people at Uganda Revenue Authority, the issue of corruption should not cause a distortion for our citizens to believe that the whole of Uganda Revenue Authority are corrupt. No, it is just a few apples that spoil the reputation of many. So I have formed a dedicated team at Uganda Revenue Authority, and I'm working with them closely to ensure that whatever is due and collectible will be collected. And I believe that our tax to GDP ratio will rise from the current 13 to something that we'll be proud of. The African average tax GDP ratio is 15.8. I believe we can pass that average and even do better. So we will try our best. I don't think I have a more specific answer on how we raise money this year, but those measures should take us somewhere.
All right, maybe just before I leave you, just two more. I'll get back to you later. One says, Benon Twinamasco says, from Twitter, he says, would like to look into the issue of clearing agents' professional professionalism, being that most of them are paid a commission of the tax they have processed, their focus tends to be more on maximizing their cut. That's one. The second one is particularly looking at, looking at the aspect of URS tax systems, especially in the chain of importation, are weak. This is Muteguya Henry, and he says a lot of money is lost here through money exchanging hands. If you could respond to those two.
Thank you, Mildred. Again, it points to the question of corruption. Now, clearing agents are definitely very key partners in the process of tax collection. And one of some of the key stakeholders that will be meeting and will be educating and will be working with closely. But one of the things that shocked me when I asked recently after getting into URI, I said, what are the clearing fees? And I was told the charge is about 40,000 per entry they process. And honestly, looking at that charge, I said there must be a problem somewhere, because how do you clear a container of goods and you charge a fee? So the comment that maybe the focus is on getting a cut more than a fee for the service could be valid, and we are going to engage our clearing agents. Clearing agents have a clear role, but that role, they must do it without extorting, without cutting deals to cause revenue loss, so that they share what would have been taxes to government with the taxpayer, but also maybe to cheat the taxpayer. So I think the issue of tax education will clearly highlight what the role of a clearing agent is. And we will not take away the business of the clearing agent, but I've been looking at the long queues sometimes at our offices, and when I ask, they say they are clearing agents. But honestly, not every tax matter has to be done by a clearing agent. So I think the taxpayer education will address these issues. Let taxpayers do what they can do directly. Let that requires clearing agents work with the clearing agents, but let the fees be transparent. Let the clearing agents ask for a fee that will sustain their business, other than focusing on thriving, making their businesses thrive through tax cuts. And also, there will be a standard. So if a clearing agent does not meet that standard, he will definitely not be licensed to continue with that business. And not only that, even to be allowed in our premises, because I'm told there are clearing agents who take the bigger share of taxpayers, who have automatic access because of their dealings. So the issues of integrity, automation of processes, transparency of our processes and systems will make everybody do their work very well, including the clearing agents. And if they deviate from that, of course, there will be penalty. And then, what was the second question, sorry?
Well, quite many of them here, but I'll be getting back to you on that other question as well. Maybe let me move on to Honorable Golobi. We will be getting to URSP immediately after Honorable Golobi. The question is, we've seen lots of differences between Parliament and Ministry of Finance. You talked about the differences in allocations. The question is, why don't you as Parliament then focus on what you think the citizens need the most? Because Ministry of Finance will say, we pass these particular amounts and this is what we projected. Parliament also does change them accordingly. Then the second one coming in from Wilbur Chiveka Yunga says, I see there has not been tangible actions taken to reduce government's expenditure so that there are savings to repay the debt in the near future. The debt stock pronounced by the national budget is higher than the total national budget for a full financial year. That is what he says. Without reduced expenditures and minimized costs, where is the hope for paying it?
Sorry?
Where is the hope for paying now that Wilbur says that he doesn't see tangible actions that have been taken to reduce government expenditure?
Yeah, that's exactly what we are also saying.
If you could kindly remove your mask.
That's what we exactly saying, that it is good to have good roads in this country. There's no objection about that. But now, if you have a cake, because this national budget is usually referred to as a national cake, and you distribute that cake in a manner that some of the beneficiaries on that cake get 60%, others end up with 5%. 20%, then you have a crisis. We are talking about roads. Mr. Kagwa has talked about our expenditure to cover the gaps in road infrastructure. While we have gaps in infrastructure, we have also gaps in the productive sectors. And these productive sectors are the ones that generate wealth for the country. When you have a country where unemployment is at over 70%, then you have a serious problem. You will not be able to generate revenue, so you'll be dependent on borrowing. Remember that this infrastructure that we are constructing, we are using largely borrowed funds. Now you need to service the debts that you obtain to construct this infrastructure. How do you get that money? You only get it by investing heavily in agriculture, in industry, in tourism, in ICT, in those areas that generate wealth for the country.
Okay.
So these roads, and I must continue to submit, are simply supportive to those sectors. Now, when you provide a lot of support and a lot of supportive infrastructure, and you provide very little for the sector that you are targeting to give you the export earnings.
And that's where the question comes.
That's where the problem is.
Whereas Ministry of Finance plans, what is Parliament doing then to ensure that the citizens...
What we have done, I think, in most of these things, we do some interventions where we do some direct allocations, but we cannot go very far. It requires the government itself, because our work, is not to develop the budget. Developing the budget is the work of government. We are there to provide oversight. And we keep telling them, unfortunately, the response has been very slow. You recall that we had NDP 1. In that NDP, you recall we had an egg concept. That concept, in that egg, the yolk was meant to be the productive sectors. And the white part was meant to be those enablers. The enablers enabling that yolk to generate the chicks. Now, that NDP was not effectively implemented. And you realize that we have had an assessment about NDP 2 also. Performance of that NDP is reported to have been unsatisfactory at 59% in terms of alignment with our budgets. So in other words, our budgets are not clearly aligned to our plans. And you see there's this old adage that says, failure to plan is like planning to fail. So these failures we are getting is as a result of not using our budgets to effectively implement our national development plans. So NDP 1, the burning constraints in there, we are not all addressed. So it is really up to the government, it's not Parliament. We have provided necessary advisory to government to effectively restructure the budget, to ensure that there is a fair balance in these allocations, to ensure that the economy moves evenly, not getting one side like this. You provide so much for infrastructure, security, whatnot, and so little for the productive areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lugorobi. I'll now go to URSB. Honorable Victoria yesterday cited that it takes forever to register, and that's one of the constraints of smaller businesses or upcoming ones.
Thank you, Mildred. And I'd like to join everybody else in thanking the Ministry of Finance and partners for organizing this conference and inviting us to it as well. I thank the feedback from Honorable Victoria and everybody else. And I'd just like to state out how we have the administrative and legal reforms we've gone through to make registration easier. We now have a one-page memorandum and articles of association.
Okay.
Because the thickness of that document is usually because we, and I'm a lawyer, we copy and paste the table which is already in the Act. So that document, one page, has got options. I adopt table A, which for instance, if you're going to be a private company, and then if there are any changes you want to make, you can attach them at the time of registration or later through registrations. Now, because of the COVID issue and I need to comply with the presidential guidelines, we have had to move a lot of our processes either online or through email platforms. So all these things are on the website, and there are telephone numbers and emails that we can be contacted through. Prior to this, and I know one of the major issues is that some people may not know, but prior to this we had a lot of sensitization, including with partners like Casita, UCIA, even the private sector foundation. We have private clinics where we have on-the-spot registration, and even as we meet the teams of these partners, we carry out on-the-spot registration. Now with COVID, we cannot meet people, but we are going into online, mainly social media, as well as print media and TV and radio. And probably the last point is that we are decentralized. We have our headquarters in Kampala, but we also have regional offices in Arua, Gulu, Mbarara, and Mbale. And together with KCCA, local government, and Ministry of Finance and URA, we have what we call TREP centers in about 44 municipalities around this country. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I hope that is well answered. Ministry of Finance, I have just 3 for you for now. Mr. Kagwa, if you could listen in. One is coming in from Dr. Issa Amina, who says government should fast track the institution of Islamic banking because it spreads the risk of the borrower and the bank. It's kind of a balance in case there is a loss. That's one, Islamic banking. The other is there is a lot of misuse of taxes collected by government. How can you end that? And maybe the other one would be from Benjamin Odong, who says, can government explain why pension sector has not been mentioned anywhere in the budget, and yet pensioners are treated as senior citizens in other countries? Suggest that money for the elderly should be paid at 60 years and not 80.
Thank you, Mildred. I think I'll be very brief. Islamic banking is operational, so it's up to the banks to apply to Bank of Uganda, and they would get a license for Islamic banking. I think banks applied, but they are not yet operational themselves in the conduct of Islamic banking. On misuse of taxes, what can we do? Yeah, we've heard, of course, a lot about corruption. So one of the things is to put systems in place to deter monies going into the wrong hands. There have been a lot of public financial management reforms on how the monies can come from the consolidated fund to votes. That is one way of making sure that we deter corruption. There has been a lot of, now you can't withdraw money, cash, you can't go to Bank of Uganda and withdraw cash except in very exceptional circumstances. So the money can be followed where it has gone and where it's, how it's been used. That is why you have found that these days at least there have been so many audit queries that are coming because there's a trace of how this money has been used. So I think that is one way we can continue using the reforms that are continuing in the accountability sector. On the pension sector, why it wasn't mentioned in the budget, I think we usually put things in the budget that are going to be done, not just to put things there because it's important. There wasn't much we had to mention in the sector that we are doing as a reform for next year to put in the budget. But there have been a lot of things going on. There is the NSSF amendment, which is before Parliament, which has not been concluded. On the issue of 60 and 80, I think that is talking about the grants to the senior citizens. Yes. We had put it at 80 because we can't afford to, as a government, we can't afford to extend it to everybody who is 60 years and above. Thank you.
All right. The next one will still be coming back a bit to URA. after clearing your container, this is from Jim on phone, they come in to clear your shop with lots of force. They're usually requesting for money. If you do not give them the money, they threaten to arrest you. Would you like to respond to that, CG?
Thank you, Jim, for that question. The only answer I can give to that is that we have already shared our toll-free lines. We have our offices open 24/7, including mine. Please bring these facts of integrity, lack of integrity on part of our staff, or extortion to our attention, and we'll deal with it firmly, and we'll set a precedence for others to follow. But also know your rights. Once you've paid your tax and you've paid them well, why should anyone come to disturb you? Put your foot down. If anyone is trying to do that kind of extortion, they will run away. But if you have any evidence, bring it and we deal with it very firmly. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Coming back to Ministry of Finance, Byron is saying, why are fuel prices highest in Uganda, yet they had dropped worldwide during the COVID-19 lockdown?
Thank you. Of course, we can say fuel prices are high in Uganda, but fuel prices are a factor of many things. One of them is the international prices of fuel, which had actually gone down to between 30 to 40 US dollars a barrel, and sometimes actually even lower. The second one, of course, the transport costs from where we are getting the fuel to here. The third is the exchange rate. What is our exchange rate? And the fourth, of course, I would put the taxes. So where and our taxes are specific. You had telling, for example, on diesel it was 880. We have added on 150 shillings. Then there is a lag because a lot of the dealers, they import fuel. There's a period, a time of 3 months when they make their orders. So they make their orders based on the prices prevailing at that time, and then they come in. So we are usually bound to see reductions maybe 2 to 3 months afterwards. But we are also concerned that the prices don't go down as fast when we have seen the international prices going down. We have talked to the Ministry of Energy, which is the one that licenses the dealers, to tell them that no, it's unfair that when the prices have gone down drastically, we don't see that immediately in the pump prices. Thank you.
All right, maybe as you do wind up, Dr. Eli talked about government owning 30% literally. Is that one you want to respond to a bit?
Yeah. Yes, I would want to respond to that. There is no company in this country that it pays 30% of its profits to government. So we have to be careful. The effective tax rate, what actually they contribute out of all the money they collect, they contribute to government, is between 0.5 to 2 or 2.5%. So what we are actually taking from them is in that range, 0.5 to 2%. But I like the idea that since we are taking some money, we are actually partners, we are shareholders in their businesses, and as Mr. Kamulege has said, we should be treating them like, we should be facilitating them to pay the taxes. So the facilitation is important, and CG has already talked about it. Going forward, we should look at these people not as to extract taxes from them, but to understand their businesses. What are their problems? What are their issues? How can we help them to grow? I think that is the way forward. And that is what the domestic revenue mobilization strategy is doing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. We don't have a lot of time, and on television we'll definitely have to be leaving in the next few minutes. So I would like Dr. Eli, I have just about 30 seconds for you to give your closing remarks.
Quickly, I want to congratulate URBS. Fantastic job. We are very proud of them as a private state of government. They work as if they are in private sector. Two, I'm surprised that Moses Kagwa is saying that 30% corporate tax is not a lot of, he doesn't know about it. But for example, I'm chairman of BAT. We make a profit of so many billions, and the government takes more than we take, and 30% corporate tax and dividend. But anyway, I just want to make a final contribution on how can the government get more taxes. And the answer is that the government needs to grow the economy so that private sector can do better and earn more and then pay more taxes. Now, local content is, for example, very clear. We collect about 12 billion in domestic taxes. About 5 billion goes to construction. 85% of that, no, 60% of that goes to foreign companies. 15% stay with us to facilitate work. If we grow local content, it means that we are looking at getting a role play in construction and moving of this road and soil. That would mean that at least in a short time, it will increase local participation to 60% in say 3 years, which would make the local consortium cheaper to do our roads, and our money will stay in, and in about the third year, we will collect $3 billion in taxes as a local content company. We would increase employment for young people and professionals. We would have industrialization. This is what has made Nigeria one of many of our banks here in Uganda and make it a very powerful country and the fast-growing economy. So, and here we would like PSFU is very happy to finalize creating a consortium for our local people to work together, from consortium, and we have facilities to make Ugandans work together so that they can participate in these big tenders and win them. And where they cannot, then we will facilitate them to be partners with foreign entities so they can do jobs together and play a role. But without that opening, that awakening by the Ministry of Finance, and we would like to do this with URA as a partner in participating. This way, there will be no corruption because we shall be as a consortium. Right now, if, for example, I just mentioned the name, if right now roofing wants to participate in a tender, they have to do it on their own without going through an organized structure. You have no idea how much they have to pay to facilitate winning that tender and how much they have to pay in order to be paid. But if we are working through a consortium, working with URA, there will be no corruption, and I am very sure we will save more than $1 billion in this, and we want to work with URA in making sure that in this method we shall abolish, get rid of corruption in essence, and also work transparently and bring money in our economy, which can be taxed, increase taxation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eli. Thank you so much for your remarks. Of course, working hazards of the new normal, working from home. I would like to come to you, Mr. Amos Lugolobi, to in just about 30 seconds give us your closing remarks.
First of all, I want to thank the Ministry of Finance and other stakeholders for this great initiative. I think it was a great opportunity for us to engage on very critical matters concerning our country. As we go forward, looking at a country where we are going to provide more support to the private sector, because the private sector is the engine of growth for our economy. Let's construct industrial parks for them so that they don't locate their factories in swamps. Let's support our